Mike Norvell and Florida State get some more help by way of South Carolina. The Gamecocks, another player coming in from the transfer portal to help on the edge. One leaving, though, that's a bit of a surprise, at least to me. Talking Florida State football with all of you right here at the Voice for College Football for the next 60. Bring those comments, bring those questions, leave them in the live chat. We will serve them up to one at Big Game James Coleman. James, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Just happy to be here. Second Wednesday of the new year, and just try to keep things pressing.
Absolutely. Well, you saved our show tonight, so I'm happy to see you. I always am, but especially tonight. So before we get cranked up on this, we want to make sure that everybody's in the know in terms of what you're up to and where they can find you and what you've got working these days.
Well, right now I cover NFL and college, so this has been a great year. It has been rough for me for quite some time, but with my alma mater being Florida State and the main NFL team I cover, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jags made the playoffs. Exciting game last week. Host a playoff game this week, so I'll be on round the clock coverage, talking more about them than I'm used to talking at this time of year. And then Florida State's got a lot of things going on. But if you go to @sportsden_live, you can check out one of the mini shows that we have currently. The most popular one we have is Big Games Big Show, or Big Games BS. And go to if you go to Sports Den Media Group on YouTube, that's kind of what we want everybody to go to right now. We're doing a giveaway. If we can get to over 2,000 subs before Saturday AM, we will be giving away 3 tickets to the Jaguars home playoff game. So we get to 2,000 subs. We're not that far away, but it's something where people got to go click it. So if anybody wants to help, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I caught the last quarter of that Titans game, and of course, strip sack with about whatever it was, 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. Did the trick, and were you at the game?
Yeah, I was at the game. It was a crazy atmosphere. I didn't get a chance to see that live though, because where the news station I work at is like on the other side of the parking lot where TIA Bank Field is. So we're like literally there, but we go live coverage. So it's on literally our station is what the game is being showed. So as soon as they're done, they've said their farewells, it literally goes to our coverage. And so they were like, you got to be there. So I left with about 4 minutes left in the game, and I'm watching it from outside, and it sucks because there's tape delay. I'm watching it, but I'm a play behind, so you can hear the roars in the crowd, and it was over 71, I think close to 71,000 people there. It was packed out. This playoff game is going to be they're selling standing room only seats, and for $150. Like, so they're like, the Jacksonville was electric, man. These people were tailgating and doing all kind. It felt like college. It's what they wanted. So imagine taking the rabid fan base of the University of Georgia, University of Florida, Florida State University, and trickle in some Miami guys, all into this one tight concoction, and that's what you got. So you had the best of. It was like an SEC tailgate.
Very cool. It looked on TV. It looked and sounded the part, no question. Winner take all kind of deal, for sure. All right. We will dive in on Florida State and start with the coaching ranks here with a new defensive back coach in one name that should be familiar to anybody who follows the NFL or college football or both. Patrick Surtain, who played his ball at Southern Miss, went to the Miami Dolphins and was a stellar player there for a long time. New DB coach. Is it corners?
Yeah, he'll be corners. Coach Fuller is
Yep.
the safeties coach. But I think this is me just forecasting. Coach Fuller's done a phenomenal job with the years that he's been there. He's kind of might extend him one more year in his contract, but his contract comes to an end, I believe, at the end of this season, or they've got to do something to extend it. And I think this was an opportunity to talk Surtain into coming in. Hey, this could be your chance to walk into a defensive coordinator spot right here. But I think he'll have more control so that Fuller can be more oversight of the entire defense, essentially be the head coach of the defense and help him where he needs to. Because that's one of the things that hasn't been going very well the last couple of years is the corners and the safeties working in concert. When you even go back and look at the Florida game and you look at some of the blown coverages have come where there's a miscommunication between what coverage they're actually in. And that's sometimes happens, but maybe we get a better pass rush. You can do like the Alabama model where your front seven is so much better. Actually, Georgia, I would say the same thing as Georgia. Georgia's front seven is so good that it doesn't matter. You're not going to have time to be able to exploit their corners. Not that their corners aren't any good, but it's just that's kind of where you would like. But with a guy like SURTAIN, you're going to have a guy that not only did it, you're going to have a guy that's coached it and coached it at every level. He's coached at high school. He was at American Heritage High School, won 2 state championships there, deeply tied into the South Florida recruiting ranks. Coached as a defensive analyst this past season, or was currently coaching as a defensive analyst for the Miami Dolphins, who will probably be done on Sunday, more than likely. But as soon as that's done, he'll be coming. So he's bringing an aspect of what it's like to play in the NFL, what it's like to coach on the NFL, but also having experience coaching high school age kids. So, which is kind of relative and relatable to the college ranks.
We'll take those comments and questions, folks. Bring them on in here at the Voice of College Football. I got to say that Malik McLean was a guy that maybe I bought too much into the spring game, but a lot of the talk surrounding the spring game from this past season was that he was obviously a guy to look out for. He caught 17 balls for 206, 3 touchdowns. He got 33 balls in 2 seasons at Florida State, but he has decided to hit the transfer portal. You consider that to be a significant loss?
Significant? No. Loss, yes, though, because I think he was the next up guy. And the problem is that wide receiver room got really, really crowded very, very quick. This time last year, it was Johnny Wilson, and we were like, okay, guy had 3 catches last year. Who cares? 6'7" guy, can't catch. Micah Pittman, who cares? Guy can't do this. Winston Wright, then he got in a wreck. And then, you're looking at the guys they brought in, and it was a bunch of, who knows, a lot of unknown variables until the season. And everybody just exploded and did their thing. And Johnny Wilson became somebody that you have to really attest for. Then you got guys like, again, Micah Pittman. We were just having an argument in my group chat about Micah Pittman and his significance. And I told somebody, you're crazy. Number 4 is just like he is a not just a role player, because I don't want to diminish or disrespect what he is, but he is the guy that's willing to do all the dirty work. You need that guy. He's blocking, he's running slants, he's sacrificing his body, he's returning kicks, he's selling peanuts, he's doing everything that you need to make this organization run properly. And then you've got guys who, like Pokey Wilson, was able to come in and do his stuff, but guys who are like really on the cusp. And the problem is the guys that were recruited in were just guys, and none of them have really stood out to be that guy. And they're bringing in some guys. Akeem Williams is a 5-star prospect. He didn't come to sit the bench. He came to play. You've got, not Goldie Lawrence. Goldie Lawrence is a kid who's coming in. I'm trying to think of the other wide receiver, the 4, Vandarius Jacobs. He's coming in, a speedy guy. Winston Wright's healthy. The receiver room is going to be competitive from day one. And what happens is guys not named Saban or Smart or even Ryan Day have not figured out this formula to get guys to wait their turn. Because I think if he would have waited one more season, everything Malik McLean would have wanted would have been right there in his lap. Same concept even with my guy Treshaun Ward, who just left last week. I think Treshaun Ward could have everything that Treshaun Ward wants in the NFL could have been received or achieved if he had stayed at Florida State. It's not, the NFL is almost becoming like how college, and I tell high school recruits this all the time. Look at when you watch this draft, and as a guy who covers it, has seen trends, I'm giving people a homework assignment. Notice everybody who's getting drafted high isn't your 1,500-yard receiver. You're going to see a guy get drafted in the early second round third round, that's got 600 yards receiving. But you know what he is going to be? He's going to be 6'2", running a 4.4. You're going to see a running back that didn't have as much banging on his body. That's going to get drafted in those middle rounds, which is probably where Trayshawn's going to go anyway. That didn't have as much wear and tear on their body, but they split carries because the NFL is not looking for guys just with a ton of production. They're looking for body types and they're looking for things that fit the system. Can you do what you think they're going to do? You don't believe me? Look at right now. Who's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now currently? I called him Trash Josh Allen. The Jags drafted good Josh Allen from Kentucky. Buffalo drafted Trash Josh Allen. Why did I call him trash? He only threw for damn near 1,000 yards at quarterback. Every time he played anybody with a pulse, he didn't look good. But my partner told me, look at his arm. He's got a big arm. He can make all the throws. He's athletic. He can do these things. And where did he get drafted? High. Translates into the NFL. It's why people talk about Anthony Richardson from the University of Florida. Stats aren't stellar, but he's considered a top 6 pick in this year's draft because you know what he can do? He can throw the ball a country mile. He's going to run 4.5. He's big. He's fast. He's physical. And they believe that they can teach you some things that you didn't learn in college. So Kirby and those guys, heck, Trayvon Walker, first overall pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, had 5 sacks. 5 sacks. I've been arguing with people now he's played well, but he ain't got no sacks. You don't draft a guy first overall compared to Aiden Hutchinson, who actually had a body of work with a whole bunch of sacks. But what they did was they saw he played in a system where it was a ton of cats. He was one of the ones that stood out, which is what you got to do these days. You got to stand out. He stood out in a room full of cats, and that's what gets you drafted. I think that's where Mike will eventually get to that point. But right now, it's guys who he hasn't recruited in that. Like the guys who are leaving are guys he hasn't really recruited or been able to build that and latch on. But it's coming soon.
Well, the next guy in line in regards to talent acquisition here is this edge rusher from South Carolina, Gilbert Edmond. He racked up 39 tackles last year, 9 tackles for loss. Excuse me, everyone. I'm fighting it a little bit tonight. 2 sacks. So Edmond comes in from South Carolina, which, of course, also produced Jaheim Bell on the offensive side. You had a chance to do any homework on this guy? I didn't know about this until the last few hours.
He was actually a guy that that was Florida State recruited heavy with tag, and that Mike was kind of on late. He was a wide receiver in high school, converted to defensive end, and so just didn't work. Ended up going to South Carolina. When you look at his body types, build. What is JP, John Papuchis, like in his defensive ends? Look at Patrick Payton, 6'4", I believe, 250 pounds. 6'5", 240 pounds. Byron Turner from out of New Orleans, 6'4", 250. Jared Verse, around that 6'5", 250 range. Guys that are long, thick, bendy. The difference between what he does not as great as those other guys, because obviously we've seen what Patrick Payton can do. We've seen what Jared Verse can do when it comes to rushing the passer. But one of the things that really bothered me this past season, and if you watch the Oklahoma game, if you watch the LSU game, if you watch the Florida game, losing Contain on the edge, consistently, that was a big problem for Florida State. Even when they tried to bring in a bigger defensive end to quote-unquote set the edge, like with your Dennis Briggs, they always kept getting beat on outside leverage. But when you go watch this film of Gilbert, you see he's a really good guy with the run, which I think he can develop into a better pass rusher with better pass rushers around you. But I think where he's going to bring in some stability and consistency is in stopping the run. Now, here's what I really like. And when people keep talking about this portal is unsustainable, the old traditional way of taking transfers is unsustainable. A bunch of one and dones is unsustainable. But this is another guy that Mike Norvell is bringing in with 3 years to play 3, if I remember correctly. I'm sorry. If you told me I have the ability to get a former 4-star transfer that has 1 to 2 years of college in a weight room and got some meals in them over a 3-star high school kid, we'll take the guy with a little bit of because he's going to probably play. He's going to give me something a little bit quicker because most freshmen aren't playing their first year. And if they're any good, they're gone in 2. They're gone in 3. So that means you're going to get at most 2 years from these guys. But the crazy thing is with this kid and even the ones that Mike Norvell's got, because we talked about Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson can come back after next season. Jared Verse can come back after next season. Trey Benson can come back after next season. Like a lot of the guys he's bringing in, like they will leave. They'll be foolish to not leave next year, but they don't have to. And I like that. What I like about this kid, this Gilbert kid. I wish we could have got the other defensive end as well, but it looks like he's committed to Oregon. But I like this pick. Right now, I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing, Mark. I am looking at the University of South Carolina roster, as we call them, USC Junior, and we're treating them like was not AAA. We're treating them like our AA farm system. I'm trying to figure out who we want to call up to the big leagues. I just want to be like, hey, come on, bring that kid on over here. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell you, Pup Howard from out of Jacksonville, I'm keeping my eyes on you. You're going up there to South Carolina. I'm going to see if you do good. And hey, might be picking up that phone and saying, hey, you need me to call Coach Norvell, get you on back to Florida, because South Carolina guys are doing very, very, very good for us. I know they're not very happy, but hey, it's working out for us.
No doubt about that, on the defensive side especially. Traditional, appreciate you being here, man. Big game. How significant do you think the transfers on the defensive line will be compared to the players who've had time to grow now, like a Farmer Lions Turner?
Well, I think it's going good. Competition breeds getting to the competition breeds what we want the standard to be. Everybody saw what the standard was on Monday. If you did not witness that, that is yeah, that was a thorough butt whooping. But how do you get to that level? The only way to do that is to see that day in and day out with competition. So you've got to do that. And one of the things that I noticed last season, it was so much emphasis put in the offensive trenches. One thing that Coach Atkins he went and got, people don't realize this. We got 10 new faces on the offensive line last season. Now he went back and got 5 more, but what I'm saying is there were 10 players. That's 2 units that he replaced on the offensive line to make sure that they brought in the proper competition. And what I told people is, what I want to see in this season coming up, the 2023 season, is us to take that same emphasis and put it on the defensive line. And also, coupled with Mike Norvell's biggest recruiting challenge was going to be to keep the guys here that could go to the NFL, keep them from going and pursuing their talents to the next level. But when you look at Fisk, who was considered one of the best D-line prospects, he's giving you something at the 3 technique that you haven't really been able to have, and giving you more depth at the defensive tackle position. Farmer, compare that with Farmer, who's been there for so long, but now Farmer's starting to come into his own, starting to learn how to play the defensive tackle position a little bit better. If you can get Daryl Jackson his clearance, which is, I guess, it was up in the air up until recently about that young man and what he was going to be able to do at Florida State. Excuse me. He's going to come in and give you a big body that you got to double team. If you can get guaranteed double teams from your interior linemen, it ain't but 5 offensive linemen unless you bring a tight end in there. So that means you got one-on-one situations with Jared Verse, one of the best defensive ends returning in the nation. Patrick Payton, ACC Rookie of the Year. Byron Turner coming in. You've got Gilbert. That's not including Derek McClendon. That's not including wave after wave of guy. Lyons is a kid who I expect more. Malcolm Ray is a guy that's either going to have to crap or get off the pot. And this is where it becomes tough, because you don't ever want these guys to hit the portal. I don't believe that guys who hit the portal are afraid of competition. I just believe the cream rises to the top. And the only way you can play is to play. And if somebody beats you out, that's just what it is. But right now, for the first time in a long time, we're talking about people beating people out. And there's a kid that came in last year's class, was supposed to be in this class, was a 4-star defensive tackle in this class, early enrolled, ended up not being able to, some things ended up happening. And I am not even going to pretend to say his last name, but it's Ayo something Nigerian. That's a grown man. Ayo was big when I saw him last year at 17 when he first enrolled. He has figured out how to get more chiseled. He has been embracing Coach Storm's offense and the nutrition program. That boy looked like a grown man. He reminds me of one of my teammates. And I don't want to, I'm hesitant on saying this because this was a top 20 pick, this guy. Broderick Bunkley is who he reminds me of. With how his body type is, his musculature, how heavy his hands are, how strong he is. I heard nothing but great things about him during practice with what he was able to bring to the offensive line. So I think Odell, for quite some time, like for the first time in quite some time, has cats. And when you got cats, it's a lot of things you can do with. And when you have the schedule that Florida State has coming up, where literally your only competition, only competitive game is your first game. If you want to, maybe a rivalry game in Miami, then you got Clemson. Like it's if you can get past that first hurdle with this talent, this depth, you got to have the expectations, man. Expectations are going to be had. So rightfully so. It's exciting times, and especially across that defensive line. The defense should be a lot more fun to watch this next season.
I was going in that direction next because we see all these crazy, way too early top 25s. Mm-hmm. And Florida State doesn't need 25 spots. They're in the top 5 range for most of these people. Now, everybody's looking for the next big splash, the next big thing, and they want to be ahead of the curve. So it sounds like you're thinking that's pretty legit and not just a bunch of media folks wanting to be the first one to say, hey, I called it.
I think it was more of a prove it year. But when you really go back and you take a step back and you look at trends, you got a top 15 defense. Most of your guys are returning. You lost your all ACC safety, Jamie Robinson, but you had preseason all ACC and Akeem Dent. You got some corners that probably didn't live up to the expectations, but that happens. But you got some guys coming in or some young guys stepping up. And you got a defensive line that we were just talking about, 2 linebackers that everybody's taking notice of. So you expect your defense to get better and improve from a top 15 perspective. You've got top 15 offense that fell asleep until after the three game skid and then woke up and literally played lights out. If you look at how Florida State's offense has played since the Clemson game, it is incredible the numbers that they have put up. You can't help but expect Jordan Travis, who's coming back another year, one of the probably scariest dual threat quarterbacks returning next year. Johnny Wilson, who I don't know if did he get over 1,000? I think he got just over 1,000 yards. Trey Benson, over 1,000 yards. No, Trey Benson was 30 yards short of 1,000, but close to 1,000. So you got a close to 1,000-yard running back, 1,000-yard receiver, 3,000-yard quarterback. And you add a Jaheim Bell, who at one point was considered one of the best tight ends in the nation before, sometimes I think people just overthink it. Like, bottom line is you get a guy like that the ball. You got Murlock, who's 6'7", 250, 260 pounds, big body tight end that you're able to put in there. You're looking at the offensive packages that you can put together against teams, and it creates matchup problems. So you have a defense that can stop people and an offense that can put pressure on another offense to have to score, to keep up with the scores. That bodes to a lot of games that you can win. What they have to do is, and this is the hard part. Again, this is where Kirby and Saban are really, really good. And I'll even give the weirdo Dabo his props too, for the most part, when they were doing their run, to keep guys humble and focused on the overall goal. I've been in a situation where you have a huge group of guys who are getting ready to get to the draft. I called it like this: like, if you like Texas Hold'em, when you get to the final table, they put the money on the table.
Sure.
They put the money on the table, one for effect, but the guys who are Zoom focused aren't paying attention to that. They're paying attention to the cards and they're reading their opponents. The guys who aren't used to being there, They're looking at the money and they can taste it. They'll get satisfied for getting out at the 8th place because you'll get a little bit of money. That's more money than you ever won before. Probably 10 times your buy-in. But the guys, the Phil Hellmuths, those guys who are there, they're literally there to win the millions. You got to get everybody that's there willing to win the millions and to play their hand to the best of their ability. It's hard to do that when you know it's right there. And with these guys coming in, they're getting NIL deals. It's getting fun. They're able to taste a little bit of success, live a little bit of success. They got to make sure to keep the main thing the main thing. Girls is liking you now. You smell better. You look, the ugly guy. When you're winning, even the ugly guys get girls. That's when you know your program's right. When your ugly ass teammate has a fine girl and you're trying to figure out how the hell did he pull that thing. That's because you're winning. And those things tend to derail progress if you don't know how to handle it. That's why they need veterans and old guys. And I like Mike Norvell always telling the old guys to come back so we can tell them like, hey, keep winning and that'll always be there. But like you start losing, they're going to remind you how ugly you are again.
Mike Norvell started 0-4 last year. And, I didn't have an opinion on his hiring for the most part. I thought that they possibly could have done better. And when I mean better, that doesn't mean that I was forecasting his demise. I was just saying based on track record and what's already been proven at the Power 5 level, of course, he wasn't the guy. Did a nice job at Memphis. But obviously they saw something in him. No question about that. So obviously he had to take over maybe this program being in the worst shape that it's been in since the mid 70s. And he's been pushing uphill ever since. And there's been many times where you could see the hope, you could see the optimism, and it looked like there was some substance behind it. And there were other times where it seemed like, man, this may not happen, and he may not be long for this school here. Besides seeing this team get on a run after the 3-game loss this year, what were some indicators for you that that even before it came to fruition that his approach was working?
Well, I'm not one of those. I hate that it looks better. Like I'm a tangible metric guy. 1 + 1 = 2. It's either black. I live in a gray area, but most things to me are black and white. You either are winning or you're losing. There are no good quality losses to me. That's just loser speak. So, and I will admit, he did inherit a bad situation. It's hard to judge mentally how bad the situation was, though. So going back and giving benefit of the doubt, you're these guys' third coach for a lot of these kids. That's not supposed to happen. So you had Jimbo who came in, and when Jimbo left, it was like, oh my God, I hated football. He tore me down. He did this. Then Tag comes in, he tries to be the cool stepdad. Like too much fun. They didn't respect that either. So you have a bunch of guys who don't know who to trust, who to respect, or what to do. So they rebel. And then you have COVID that happens to where the time that you would have normally spent getting to know these guys, you lost. You lost an entire spring. You lost an entire offseason workout. We didn't even know if we were going to have a 2020 season. That being said, you had enough talent to not go 3-6. And what happened was the fan base has been split. And they treat sports like they treat politics and everything else. This is not good versus evil. There is no line in the sand. We're all you're Florida State fans. I can promise you, nobody wants to see Florida State go defeated. But at the same time, people were upset with the Tag hire, how he was fired. And Mike probably got a lot of heat that he didn't earn, but it's because he was the guy. They fired a coach in the middle of the season. Nobody fires a coach in the middle of the season to hire a G5 guy and let him finish coaching. You do that to make a splash hire, a big time hire, and guys immediately leave. Hell, We just saw with Wisconsin. When they hired the Cincinnati coach, it's ain't no waiting. This is Wisconsin. You either stay your ass in Cincinnati or you come up here. So we knew Mike wasn't the first choice, but it's not Mike's fault. Mike is the coach. So people were trying to support him and they're trying to be overly optimistic. But at the same time, the reasons why you fired the coach before, and now you're looking at what's going on right now, it's looking like you made at the time, which was still crazy, a $9 million mistake because of what you were paying Norvell and the buyout annually for Willie Taggart. So then the next year comes and you see they get some pieces. You can see marked improvement, but the team still doesn't look like it belongs. And not just on the field, like not just from the play, but from a size perspective. My son has got a chance to watch high school, college, NFL. I always joke, Trey Coleman is the best reporter on FSU's beat. He's going to always tell you the truth. You looked at him. I looked at him for guidance. I've actually listened to this young man watch football games. It shocks me how much he actually knows about the game of football for a 9-year-old. It's crazy. I'm not just saying that because he's my son. He ain't any good at playing football right now, but he knows the game. We went to go see FSU's practice in 2021 when they came to Jacksonville. He said, "Dad, is this a high school practice or is this a college practice?" I said, "Jesus, that is not what I wanted. That is not what I wanted to hear." So fast forward, and then even then, they were in situations where they shouldn't have lost 4 games in a row. A play here or there, they win it. There's no excuse to lose at Jacksonville State. Yeah, no excuse to lose at Jacksonville State. You should have beat Notre Dame. You should have, then the game that turned it around, you should have lost to Syracuse. A field goal at the end with Fitz wins you that game. But you did. Should have beat Florida with no staff, but you didn't. 5-7, whatever. You go on. Well, then this time last year, you're bringing in a bunch of guys that nobody knows about. And then I'm not even going to bring up the McKenzie Miller. And I think if you would have let Jordan Travis play and not messed with him in all of 2021, I think your record would have been way different. Fast forward this year, you don't bring in another quarterback. Everybody's fussing at you, yelling at you. Jay Trav's not any good. And I'm just steady listening to coaches, people say this, and I'm steady watching it. And I'm like, yo, I see it. And I remember what Kenny Dillingham told me. And this is what made me change my mind. Listening to coach, one of the things that I get an opportunity to do, I don't interview coaches for a reason. I'll interview Mike once a year just because I should. I like being able to talk to these guys in a real conversation because they ain't gonna talk to me like when I put them on camera, like they need to. But when Kenny Dillingham told me, and he told me when he took the job at Oregon, he doubled down on it. He said, "James, I'm telling you, Jordan Travis with average athletes around him is a Heisman Trophy candidate." He told me that after we played Miami. He told me that again after he took the Oregon job. He hit me up this season once he got the Arizona job, told me, "I told you about that, boy." So that's in my mind. I'm seeing these guys, don't know anything about them, not even worried about it. I go to the first spring practice. I'm looking. I'm like, man, the offensive line looks massive. They look like they can actually block some people. See Johnny Wilson. I'm like, yo, that is a giraffe walking across here. I'm looking at the guys and I'm like, I'm seeing physical body types that I'm like, yo, would I have been able to play on this team? That's what time when I go in the locker rooms, I sit back and be like, could I have played on this team? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I would have been, there would have been a spot for me on this team right now. These guys are pretty big and moving. Then I was like, well, it's short. And I made a comment like, this is the best first day of practice I've seen in the last 5 years. And oh God, everybody was just like, they took those words and thought I was winning national championships. I said, hey, calm down. But I've always been, I said, 8 wins, we get on a run, we can win 10. I take my son to the first practice. Again, Trey's the best. Now, Trey is not afraid of anything. Trey has seen celebrities. He has never been in awe. First and foremost, he smiled at Mike Norvell, so I knew something was changing. My son has pictures with Mike Norvell every year he's been there. He's been looking at Mike like he's a loser for most of them. He's like, I can't believe my dad's over here talking about the standard is the standard. Got me around these 3 and 6 losers and jokes like that. Trey sees Mike Norvell, shakes his hand, hugs him, ear to ear smile. crazy ear to ear smile, like just really like excited to be there. Sees Coach Fuller, daps up Coach Fuller, loves Coach Fuller to death. And he ain't telling me this is a high school team anymore. He's like, Daddy, these guys big. They've been eating. They've been drinking. What happened? I said, that's what happens when you're drinking milk, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's when you're going to get big like these guys. And I saw that first day of practice, and it was physical. It was competitive. It was hitting in a manner in which I hadn't seen in some time. And, I had some friends who were judging it based upon what they saw at Georgia. And I told them, first and foremost, this ain't Georgia. Don't compare us to the university. That's not fair to anybody. But compared to what I've seen in the past, this is a better team. And what we have to face in the ACC, this is a team that can compete for ACC championships. And that was my mindset. And that's what the standard is to me. If we're not competing for an ACC championship, then what are we doing? This is not Wake Forest. This is not this is not NC State, where you've had one 10-win season in your 117 years of existence. This isn't even the University of Florida, where you've had 19 in over 100 years of existence. This is Florida State, where in our short amount of time, we've only been playing football, I believe, 69 years. Of that, we've had 25 10-win seasons. Of that, Coach Bowden was a coach for 40 of them. So, like, you could just take, basically most of the time, 29 years were irrelevant outside of Jimbo. Excuse me. So Jimbo so basically in that time period, we've had 50 years where we've been a legitimate program. And in that time period, you've seen a lot of success. Doesn't mean you're going to always win the championship. But if we weren't in the discussion, like, that would have been crazy. And the craziest thing is, if people want to be untroller, and I know there's going to be trollers in the comment section, but if you go back and you look at the Wake Forest game, imagine Jared Verse being healthy and playing that entire game, and a Fabian Lovett, who I didn't even mention. I forgot about Fabian, who was dominant, crazy dominant when he in that LSU game, but got hurt and could not finish the season. You probably win that game. Imagine Fabian and Verse playing. Imagine Florida State scoring an offensive point, a touchdown, just one point. Three points is all we needed. You beat North Carolina State. What's wild in all of that is, if you win 2 of those 3 games, which you had an opportunity to win, you're not only in the ACC championship, people are going to look at your win against LSU, and if you beat Clemson, your win against Clemson, and your win against North Carolina if you would have had the opportunity. And you know where you're at in year 3 after all of that time? You're talking about a few plays away from being in a college football playoff. Now, we'd have got work like TCU, but the point is that with the roster you had, you're not far away. So, add Jaheim Bell, add Murlock, add Gilbert, add Fisk, add Daryl Jackson, add Deuce from UVA, the cornerback. On top of all of the guys that you have coming back, one could be very, very excited about the upcoming college football season.
Yeah, from a football standpoint, judging it with much less expertise, but still, I watch a lot of football. When they played Clemson last year, the 21 season, and that game went down the last couple minutes of the season, or the last couple minutes of the game, and it wasn't so much just the score on the scoreboard and them coming within a few plays of winning the game or a final drive of winning that game. It was just the physicality of them matching up, and that was the first time in about 5 years I thought I'm watching maybe not a vintage Florida State Clemson game, but I'm watching it actually looks like a Florida State Clemson game for the first time in 5 years. They physically looked like they belonged on the field.
And that's a big thing. It's weird to say these things, but it's what happened. So, yeah, Jimbo came in, and let's say Jimbo fell asleep at the wheel his last year when it came to recruiting. Tad came in and wanted to run an offense that was a complete 180 from what Jimbo was running. Up tempo, run 100 plays, whereas Jimbo was pro style. If you ran 65 plays in a game, that was going to be great. So you're trying to flip that. When you flip that, it takes a training and it takes retraining body types. And that's not really conducive to winning, especially when you try to do it overnight. Then you fire a guy 18 months into trying to change the roster into an up tempo to be able to come back. So now you've got 3 types of offenses and defenses in a situation where it's going to be tough. So to say we didn't belong and didn't have the body types is it's accurate because we didn't. And it was just because it's impossible because nobody knew what our identity was. The kids didn't know what their identity was. So like, well, I would say that too. One of the other things, talking to Kalen DeLoach, who's like a little brother to me. When Kalen said, I said, what's the difference? He said, for the first time, I know what's expected of me. I didn't know, like, in 2020, Norvell wasn't here. I didn't know what to do. 2021, we're still trying to learn them. 2022 is like, all right, I know when period 5 comes, I need to run here. I know the pace. I know. So now that's how you create culture. That's how you create things like that is guys have to know. And I think we took advantage of, not took advantage of it, we took it for granted as Florida State fans, right? So I don't really know what it was like to be Bobby's first team. Like when I came out to practice, I just followed everybody else. When the whistle blew, my seg's going this way. I got to go follow them. Then I see my coach go this way. They didn't have that. Hell, the coaches didn't even know where they were going. Most of them had just got there. So now you finally got guys who know where everything goes and where things are supposed to be placed in. And now we'll see if they can build upon that and if the leaders continue to lead. That's really why I think you'll see. And not just who's the leaders from like vocal and they're going to do leaders follow as well. Who has the ability to step up and take the team on their back, but also be able to follow or be led? If they have that, then they're going to be in a great situation.
James, one more big picture football question, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. So you mentioned the standard, meaning in college football, Georgia. Georgia's the best team. Nobody's going to argue that. That's got half a brain. Whatever you consider to be the best teams after that, Alabama, Ohio State, whatever the order or whatever the grouping, we saw 2 semifinal games that were so ridiculously close, competitive. One of them was more crazy than good. The other one was good, meaning TCU, Michigan was just zany, crazy, aberration type plays all over the place. Georgia, Ohio State, to me, was more just these are 2 crazy talented teams just locked in and going after each other. And then we see TCU able to beat one of those teams, and then they get completely run out. But we see Ohio State, if their kicker makes a 50-yard field goal, they're playing for the national championship, and I don't think they put up a 65-7 score, but you got to think they're the national champions. Is all that just explained by matchups?
Yeah, it's kind of like boxing. Like, so perfect is actually, yeah. Here's the perfect example. Joe Frazier beats Muhammad Ali. Joe Frazier loses to not Evander Holyfield. What's my guy's name?
Ken Norton, Bernie Shaver,
George Foreman.
George Foreman
loses George Foreman, dominated by George Foreman. Ali beats Foreman. Matchups dictate styles, and styles make fights. And what you saw was in the national championship game. Actually, none of them. Sonny Liston. The first one, Sonny Liston versus Ali, went long. Second one, bam, quick. Called it a shadow punch. Said he threw the fight. I don't know. I've been tapped on the jaw one time before. Sometimes you get tapped on the jaw really good, and it's hard to just recover it. And if somebody comes and just after they punch you, they keep punching you, eventually it's going to be no contest. The only difference with football is there's no running clock after you get past high school. So the TCU game just got out of hand really, really quick. And those guys didn't know how to match the pace in which Georgia had set. It's not an SEC gumbo or some SEC voodoo or trickery, because if and it doesn't matter. If I got told somebody I don't think Florida State beats Georgia, right? So if you're telling me that Alabama should have been in because they're Alabama, well, who did Alabama lose to? They lost to LSU and Tennessee. You know who LSU and Tennessee lost to? Georgia, handedly. Like, finish what's on your plate. But we also saw again, Ohio State. Ryan Day lost the game to Georgia more than Georgia beat them. So I think it's not that they're far away. I just think that was the best game that Georgia's ever put together. And I think it's hard to beat a team that talented unless you've got 4 and 5 stars that can go with them. And Georgia never had to be made uncomfortable at any point in that game, whereas TCU was made uncomfortable. You saw a lot of, especially just they respected the run entirely too much. It was just things that just didn't even make solid football sense that they were doing. Like the defensive ends always crashing down with nobody coming over the top. So like when right before Stetson Bennett pulled and scored the first touchdown, he handed it off. And the first thing that I said was like, wow, if Stetson keeps that ball, there's literally nobody on the right side. So what they do, same play, but they go zone read to the right. Stetson keeps it, scampers to the left. Nobody touches him. That's not consistent to a really good coach team. That's just the moment being too big for the guys. So I think there is a top tier. I'll give Georgia the top tier by themselves because when you win back-to-back national championships, you've earned that. But I think in that second tier, there are your Ohio States, there are your Michigans, your Alabamas. I think LSU is maybe argued enough to be able to be close to that. If they're not in tier 2, they're in tier 3. But I think your conference champions are not that far below. I will always argue this. Actually, I think the Big Ten is a better football conference top to bottom than any of them. But there are only 1 to 2 teams in every conference that can legitimately compete with anybody in the nation at any given year. It doesn't always have to be the same 1 to 2, but in each season, there's only 1 to 2 teams. Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten. I believe if things bounce the ball down, Florida State and Clemson, I'll give it more Clemson than Florida State. I think Alabama, Georgia, LSU, I'll give them 3. USC, Oregon in the Pac-12. TCU, I believe, obviously they were, rightfully so, they were in the Big 12. If you put those teams in the college football playoff and let them all play each other, I think you'll still end up with a similar scenario. It wouldn't have changed. It's just we want to believe that Alabama is just the SEC is the end all be all with it. No, it's just Saban did a damn good job, and now Saban Light in Kirby is doing a really, really good job. And Brian Kelly is the only person who can disrupt that whole thing. But I don't even know how well that's going to go at LSU. But I think I hate that the season, a great season, ended with that game. I really wish we could have got the Ohio State Georgia game to end the season. But sometimes that's the way it happens. Blowouts happen. Blowouts happen in March Madness all the time. That's why I don't believe it. Well, I want to expand it now because if we would have had a 12-team playoff, it would have benefited Florida State. So I would have wanted to be in it. But if you expand it, the blowouts are going to be even worse. And there's going to always be an argument. It's like they always talk about the last 4 out, last 4 in when it comes to March Madness. People are going to always cry about not being in. That's why your regular season is your college football playoff. Like, that's the regular season games matter. Win what's on your schedule and then let it all balance out at the end of the year.
Big game. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate you. Appreciate all that you deliver. I always learn a lot. I know everybody else does as well. All right, folks, come on back next Wednesday. We'll be here to talk Florida State football with you again. That's next Wednesday at 6 Eastern time. Big game. Have a great rest of your weekend.